In a small, humble village over 2,000 years ago, the world witnessed the birth of a man who would change the course of history. His name was Jesus Christ. Today we embark on a journey through his life, a story filled with miracles, teachings, love, and sacrifice. Join us as we delve deep into the life of Jesus, from his miraculous birth to his crucifixion. The life of Jesus Christ. It was early in the morning when Jesus was handed over to the Roman soldiers. The governor, Pontius Pilate, despite finding no fault in him, had yielded to the shouts of the crowd. "Crucify him! Crucify him!" they screamed, their voices growing louder and more insistent with every passing moment. The soldiers took Jesus, stripping him of his garments, and began their cruel work. They mocked him as a false king, draping him in a scarlet robe and twisting together a crown of thorns, pressing it onto his head. Blood ran down his face, mingling with the sweat from the pain and heat. They knelt before him in mock homage, laughing, spitting on him, and striking him with a reed. Yet in the midst of this brutality, Jesus remained silent. His eyes, though filled with pain, carried a deep compassion and sorrow, not for himself, but for those who were tormenting him. The soldiers, growing bored with their mockery, tore the robe from his back, reopening his wounds. They led him away, making him carry the heavy wooden cross upon which he would soon hang. The path to Golgotha, the place of the skull, was long and difficult. Jesus stumbled under the weight of the cross, his strength waning from the beatings and the scourging. The streets were filled with a mixture of jeers and wails. Some looked on in hatred, others in sorrow. Mary, his mother, stood among the crowd, her heart breaking with each step he took. The pain of a mother witnessing the suffering of her child was unimaginable. At one point, Jesus could no longer bear the weight of the cross. The soldiers, impatient to reach Golgotha, seized a bystander, Simon of Cyrene, and forced him to carry the cross behind Jesus. Simon's initial reluctance turned to a sense of duty as he saw the suffering man beside him, a man who bore his suffering with a divine dignity and calm. When they finally reached Golgotha, the place of execution, the soldiers wasted no time. They threw Jesus down onto the cross, stretching his arms wide. Iron nails, thick and rough, were driven into his hands and feet with brutal force. With each strike of the hammer, the sound echoed across the hill, a grim reminder of the suffering that was being inflicted upon an innocent man. Jesus winced but did not cry out. His silence was a stark contrast to the noise and chaos surrounding him. The cross was lifted and dropped into a hole with a heavy thud. Jesus hung there between two criminals, his body racked with pain. The soldiers gambled for his clothing at the foot of the cross, indifferent to his suffering. Above his head, a sign read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, meant to mock him, yet proclaiming a profound truth to the world. The crowd gathered around, a sea of faces filled with different expressions. Some watched with curiosity, others with contempt. The religious leaders, who had orchestrated this moment, sneered. "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." One of the criminals crucified beside him joined in the mockery, taunting Jesus. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Don't you fear God, since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then turning to Jesus, he pleaded, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus, amidst his own agony, turned to him and spoke words of assurance. "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." As the hours passed, darkness fell over the land. Though it was only midday, the sun hid its face, and a deep foreboding silence filled the air. Jesus, in his suffering, cried out in Aramaic, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It was a cry of profound anguish, not just physical but spiritual, a moment of separation from the Father, bearing the weight of all humanity's sins. Nearby, Mary, the mother of Jesus, stood with a group of women. Her face was lined with grief, her tears flowing freely. Beside her was John, the beloved disciple. Jesus, seeing them, in one of his last acts of love, said, "Woman, behold your son," and to John, "Behold your mother." Even in his final moments, he cared for those he loved, ensuring his mother would be cared for after his death. With his strength fading, Jesus spoke again, "I thirst." A soldier dipped a sponge in sour wine and lifted it to his lips. Jesus took the sour wine and, gathering what little strength he had left, uttered his final words, "It is finished." It was not a cry of defeat, but a declaration of victory. The work he had come to do was complete. The debt of sin was paid in full. With a loud voice, he then said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And with that, he breathed his last. The earth trembled, rocks split, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, symbolizing that the barrier between God and humanity had been removed. The centurion who stood guard exclaimed, "Truly, this was the Son of God." The crowd began to disperse, some beating their breasts in grief, others filled with confusion. The disciples, who had watched from a distance, were devastated, their hearts heavy with sorrow and fear. As evening approached, a rich man named Joseph of Arimathea, who was also a secret follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for his body. Gently, he and Nicodemus, another follower, took Jesus down from the cross. They wrapped his body in linen cloths along with spices, as was the custom for burial. They placed his body in a new tomb cut out of rock, rolling a large stone across the entrance. The religious leaders, fearing that his disciples might steal the body and claim he had risen, asked Pilate for a guard to be posted. And so, soldiers were stationed and the tomb was sealed. It seemed like the end. Darkness had fallen and hope was buried with Jesus in that cold, dark tomb.